The story is titled, Signed, Sealed, Gone. He forged one signature and walked out a free man. The bus smelled of diesel, stale urine, and the terrified sweat of 40 men chained together by the ankles. You don't forget that smell. It settles in the back of your throat and coats your lungs, a physical reminder that you are no longer a person, but cargo. We rolled through the gates of San Quentin State Prison just as the fog was rolling off the bay, that damp, bone-chilling gray that makes the walls look like they're sweating. I looked out the wire mesh window and saw the gun towers. They weren't cinematic. They were just ugly industrial perches where bored men held rifles and waited for someone to make a mistake. My name is Julian Hayes, 32, male, and up until that morning I was an archivist for a mid-sized municipal firm. I didn't kill anyone. I didn't sell dope. I just moved numbers from one column to another to cover a gambling debt that spiraled out of control. Wire fraud. White-collar crime, they said. I expected a camp, maybe a low-security facility with fences you could see through. But the system is a chaotic, hungry beast, and due to overcrowding and a clerical mix-up regarding flight risk, I was dumped here, in the maw of the beast, with lifers and gang dropouts. Processing was a slow, deliberate stripping of humanity. We were herded into a holding cage, standing shoulder to shoulder. I tried to make myself small. You learn that fast. Don't make eye contact. Don't look at the floor. Just look through people. Keep your face blank. The guy next to me was shaking. A kid named Marcus Twitch Shelby, 22, male, clutching his stomach like he was trying to hold his insides together. He threw up on his boots. Nobody moved away because there was nowhere to move. We just stood in the sour stench until the guards came. That was the first time I saw Officer Big Mac Macklin, 48, male. He wasn't the biggest guard, but he took up the most space. He walked with a swagger that said he hoped you would try something. He saw the vomit on Twitch's boots and smiled. Not a happy smile, but the grimace of a man who just found an excuse. "Clean it up," Macklin said, pointing a baton at the puddle. "With your shirt." Twitch hesitated. That was his mistake. You don't hesitate in the intake. Macklin kicked the back of Twitch's knee, sending him crashing into the muck. The sound of the baton cracking against the kid's ribs echoed off the concrete. It was a wet, dull thud. I stared at the peeling paint on the wall, focusing on a single flake of gray, counting the seconds until the noise stopped. That was my first lesson. Cruelty here isn't a punishment. It's a pastime. By the time I got to my cell in North Block, I was numb. The noise of the tier hits you like a physical wave, a constant roaring din of shouting, clanging metal, and flushing toilets. It never truly stops. It just changes pitch. My cell was a 6x8 concrete box I had to share with Raimundo Ray Ortiz, 54, male, a man with a roadmap of scars across his forearms and eyes that looked like they'd seen the end of the world and found it boring. Ray didn't get up from his bunk when the gate slammed shut behind me. He just watched me struggle with my bedroll. "Top bunk," he said, his voice like gravel grinding in a mixer. "Don't hang your towel on the left side. That's my view." I climbed up, my hands shaking. The mattress was 2 inches of compressed foam on a steel slab. I lay there, staring at the graffiti scratched into the ceiling. Names, dates, prayers, threats. Dios mío, Killer K. I was here. I felt the walls closing in, literally pressing against my temples. The realization hit me then, heavy and suffocating. I was buried alive. For the first 2 weeks, I was a ghost. I didn't speak unless spoken to. I learned the rhythm. Count at 4 a.m., breakfast at 5:30, the yard, the shuffle, the lockdown. But my eyes, trained from years of staring at ledgers and finding the discrepancies, started to wander. I watched the guards more than the inmates. I watched how they handled the paperwork. The administration in San Quentin was drowning. I saw it in the way the chaotic stacks of transfer papers piled up on the desk in the bubble when the door was cracked open. I saw it in the exhaustion of the clerks. They were sloppy. They didn't care. One afternoon, during a chaotic mail call, Macklin was tossing letters onto the table like he was feeding pigeons. He held up a thick manila envelope addressed to an inmate 2 cells down. He weighed it in his hand, smirked, and then tossed it into the return to sender bin without even checking the stamp. Improper packaging, Macklin muttered, though it was perfectly fine. He just didn't feel like processing it. I watched that envelope land in the bin. I looked at the clipboard Macklin had left on the counter while he laughed with another CO. It was a transfer manifest. Signatures, dates, authorizations. It was a mess of scribbles, a bureaucratic nightmare held together by apathy. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear of violence this time, but from a sudden, sharp clarity. In the outside world, a signature is a formality. Here, a signature is a key. And these keys were being guarded by men who were too lazy to turn the lock. I looked at my hands. They were soft, uncalloused, useless for fighting. But they knew how to hold a pen. They knew how to mimic the slant of a J or the loop of a B. Ray snored below me, a deep, rattling sound. The tears screamed and banged around us. But for the first time since I stepped off that bus, the numbness receded, replaced by a cold, dangerous electricity. I wasn't just an inmate anymore. I was an auditor. And I had just found a discrepancy. Time in San Quentin doesn't move in a line. It moves in a loop. You wake up, you count, you eat the slop, you dodge the violence, you sleep. Repeat. 3 months bled into 6, and the numbness I felt on arrival hardened into a callus. I became part of the gray scenery, a fixture in North Block like the rusting pipes and the chipped paint. I learned to navigate the yard without looking at the wrong people, how to barter instant coffee for protection, and how to hold my bladder for hours because the toilet in the cell backed up every Tuesday. Ray Ortiz barely spoke to me for the first 90 days. We existed in parallel, orbiting each other in that 6x8 box. But he was watching. Ray noticed that while other guys were sharpening shanks out of toothbrushes or gambling away their chow, I was studying the trash. I had landed a job as a porter for the administrative corridor, the fishbowl. It was the lowest of the low, mopping floors and emptying bins for the staff who looked at us like we were diseased livestock. But for me, it was access. It was the only place in the prison that smelled like coffee and toner instead of bleach and despair. Officer Macklin was usually the one supervising the detail, which meant there was no supervision at all. He'd sit in the bubble, feet up, reading car magazines or flirting with the female dispatchers on the phone, while I pushed a mop bucket past the open doors of the case manager's offices. That's where I learned the anatomy of the bureaucracy. I saw the sheer volume of paperwork that greased the gears of the prison system. Transfer orders, court mandates, medical releases, stacks of them, teetering on desks, waiting for a stamp, a signature, a moment of attention that rarely came. The system was too big, too tired, and too arrogant to check itself. One Tuesday in November, the rain was hammering against the skylights, drumming a chaotic rhythm that made the whole block edgy. In the fishbowl, a clerk had spilled a latte over a stack of forms. I watched as she cursed, crumpled the top 3 sheets, and tossed them into the wastebasket before storming off to the break room. My heart did that heavy, thudding thing against my ribs. I mopped my way closer, the gray water swirling in the bucket. Macklin was busy yelling at a trustee about a sandwich order. I dropped my rag. As I bent to pick it up, my hand slipped into the bin. I felt the wet, warm paper. I balled it up into my sleeve in one fluid motion, a sleight of hand I'd never practiced but executed with the desperation of a drowning man. Back in the cell, after lockdown, I smoothed out the prize on my bunk. It was a Form 135. Inmate transfer authorization. Stained with coffee, wrinkled, but the structure was visible. The letterhead, the font, and at the bottom, the signature line for Deputy Warden Vance. I needed a pen. Not the flimsy, flexible safety pens they sold in the commissary that bent if you pressed too hard. I needed a real ballpoint, something with weight and flow to mimic the authority of a state official. "Ray," I whispered. The lights were dimmed, the tear settling into its nightly chorus of coughs and distant shouting. Ray was on the bottom bunk, staring at a photo of a car he'd probably never drive again. "What?" "I need a pen, a real one, black ink, Pilot or Bic." Ray shifted, the springs groaning. "That's contraband, gringo. Get caught with a rigid pen, they throw you in the hole for a weapon." "I know," I said. "Can you get it?" He sat up, his dark eyes catching the sliver of light from the corridor. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. He didn't see the soft accountant anymore. He saw the hunger. "Cost you 3 packs of smokes and your fruit cups for a month." Done. 2 days later, I found a black Bic ballpoint tucked inside my mattress. That night, while Ray pretended to sleep, I started to work. I used the back of a legal pad I'd legally obtained. I practiced Vance's signature. I had seen it on a memo posted in the hallway. It was a jagged, aggressive scrawl, the signature of a man who was always in a hurry. I filled page after page. Vance, Vance, D, Vance. My hand cramped, but I didn't stop. I was channeling the ghost of the man who held the keys. Suddenly, a scream tore through the block, high-pitched and terrifyingly young. It came from 2 cells down, then the dull thuds of boots on flesh. I froze. I knew that voice. It was Twitch. I scrambled to the bars, pressing my face against the cold steel. I saw Twitch being dragged out of his cell by 2 guards, his face a ruin of blood and bruising. He wasn't moving. They dragged him like a sack of laundry, leaving a wet streak on the concrete. Macklin was walking behind them, swinging his baton, looking bored. "Slip and fall," Macklin shouted to the tier, daring anyone to contradict him. "Kid slipped in the shower." I pulled back, my breath coming in jagged gasps. The rage was different now. It wasn't hot. It was cold. It was precise. They could kill us whenever they wanted. Twitch was just a warm-up. If I stayed, I was dead. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but San Quentin would eat me. I sat back down on my bunk, my hands trembling. But when I picked up the pen, the trembling stopped. I looked at the paper. "You're gonna get us killed." Ray's voice came from the darkness below. He wasn't sleeping. I didn't hide the paper. I held it up so he could see the rows of perfect signatures, the key to the lock. "No, Ray," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, steady, hollow, certain. "I'm going to walk us out the front door." Ray climbed off his bunk. He looked at the paper, then at me. He traced the signature with a callous thumb, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at the door where Twitch had just been dragged out. "Not just walk," Ray murmured, the cynicism cracking just enough to show the desperation underneath. "We need a route, and for that, you need the mailroom." The plan had a shape now, but shape wasn't enough. We needed weight. And I had just forged the first link in the chain that would either save us or hang us. Paranoia is a physical weight. It sits at the base of your neck, tight and hot, grinding your vertebrae together. For 6 weeks, I carried that weight, along with a stolen sheet of crisp, ivory-colored administrative bond paper I'd managed to slide inside my shirt during a chaotic shift change in the fishbowl. That single sheet of paper was heavier than the concrete walls. It was the only thing keeping me alive, and it was the one thing that could get me killed. We had the paper. We had the pen. Now we needed the words. Handwriting the entire document was suicide. The clerks typed everything. I needed access to the IBM Selectric sitting on the desk of the unit secretary, a harried woman named Ms. Gable who took 3 smoke breaks an hour. "Thursday," Ray whispered one night, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ventilation. Thursday is inspections. The warden walks the yard. The COs tighten up outside, which means the admin block runs loose. That's your window. And the distraction? I asked, staring at the ceiling. Don't worry about the noise, Ray said. There was a grim finality in his tone that I didn't question. Thursday came with a leaden sky. The atmosphere in North Block was brittle, like dry kindling waiting for a spark. I was on porter duty, mopping the linoleum in the admin corridor. The smell of floor wax mixed with the stale coffee from the break room. My hands were sweating so badly I had to keep wiping them on my jumpsuit. At 10:15 a.m., the yard alarm blared. It wasn't the rhythmic test siren. It was the erratic, screaming wail of a riot in progress. Ray. I didn't look out the window. I didn't hesitate. While Macklin ran toward the exterior door, baton drawn, shouting into his radio, I slipped into Ms. Gable's empty office. The room was silent compared to the chaos outside. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I fed the stolen paper into the typewriter. The roller clicked, a sound like a gunshot in the quiet room. I had memorized the spacing. I didn't look at the keys. From Office of the Warden to Records Transportation. Emergency transfer, overcrowding relief, protective custody. My fingers flew. Every keystroke felt deafening. Clack, clack, clack. I typed my name. Hayes Julian, inmate number 89402. Then, a pause. I typed Ortiz, Raimundo. I hadn't told Ray I was taking him. He thought I was just cutting a path for myself. But after Twitch, after the nights he'd kept watch while I practiced Vance's signature, I couldn't leave him in this tomb. Clack. I pulled the paper out just as the door to the outer hallway swung open. I dove under the desk, curling into a ball, clutching the document against my chest. Heavy boots stomped past. Macklin. He was out of breath, smelling of ozone and aggression. He stopped right by the desk, his radio crackling. Secure on the south wall. We need medical in the yard. Inmate down. Lots of blood. I squeezed my eyes shut. Ray. Macklin moved on. I waited 10 seconds, then scrambled out, folded the paper into a tight square, and shoved it into my sock. I grabbed the mop bucket and started scrubbing the same spot of floor I'd cleaned 10 minutes ago, my vision blurring with panic. The aftermath of the disturbance was a lockdown that lasted 3 days. Ray came back to the cell that night with a swollen jaw and 3 broken fingers, taped together with duct tape. He looked at me, his good eye swollen into a slit. "You look like hell," I whispered. "Distraction," he mumbled through the pain. "You get it done?" I nodded, pulling the folded paper from my mattress. I smoothed it out. It was typed. It was official. But it was naked. It needed the soul. I took out the black Bic pen. This was it. I closed my eyes and summoned the image of the transfer manifest I'd seen months ago. The arrogant, jagged slant of Deputy Warden Vance. I stopped being Julian Hayes. I became the state. I became the authority. I signed it. The ink flowed perfectly. D. Vance. A sharp underline. A dot that looked like a stab wound. "It's done," I said, my voice trembling. Ray looked at the paper, then at his name typed below mine. He went still. "You stupid son of a bitch," he whispered, but he didn't look angry. He looked terrified. "You just doubled the weight." "We go together, or we don't go," I said. But the victory was short-lived. The next morning, the shakedown came. It wasn't a routine toss. Macklin tore through the cell like a man possessed. He knew something was wrong. He could smell the tension on us. He ripped the sheets, dumped the books, smashed Ray's soap dish. I stood against the wall, the folded transfer order tucked into the waistband of my boxers, the paper biting into my skin. Macklin kicked my mattress over. He heard a rattle. He reached into the seam and pulled out the black Bic pen. He smiled. It was a terrifying, dead-eyed smile. "Contraband," he said softly. He looked at me, then at Ray. "Whose is it?" It's mine, Ray said instantly. Macklin turned and swung the baton. It caught Ray in the stomach, folding him in half. As Ray gasped for air on the floor, Macklin pocketed the pen. He stepped close to me, his face inches from mine, his breath smelling of chewing tobacco and malice. I know you're up to something, college boy, Macklin hissed. I'm going to watch you, every second. You breathe wrong, and I bury you. He left, taking the pen, the only tool I had to fix any mistakes. We were left in the wreckage of the cell. Ray was wheezing, clutching his ribs. The transfer order was still warm against my skin, signed and sealed. But now we had no way to plant it. The mailroom was too risky. Macklin was watching the outgoing bin like a hawk. The legal mail, Ray gasped from the floor. Tomorrow, the lawyer box. They can't open it. Federal law. I don't have a lawyer, I said. Then you better invent one, Ray said, closing his eyes. Because once that paper hits the box, the clock starts. And if they check the log before the bus comes, we're dead. I looked at the document. It was a masterpiece of forgery. It was a death warrant. The next morning, with shaking hands, I dropped a manila envelope into the locked blue box marked Legal Mail. Privileged. As it slid through the slot, I felt a physical snap inside my chest. There was no taking it back. The lie was in the system now. We were either leaving in a van or in body bags. The wait began. 72 hours. That's how long it takes for a piece of paper to travel from the bottom of a mail bin through the labyrinth of the records department and onto the desk of a transport officer. 72 hours of holding my breath. Every time a key jingled or a shadow fell across the bars, I thought it was Macklin coming to finish what he started. Ray lay on the bottom bunk, nursing his broken fingers. He didn't ask if it would work. He knew that hope was a dangerous thing to vocalize. We just waited in the crushing noise of North Block, 2 men drowning in plain sight. On the morning of the 4th day, the loudspeaker crackled. It wasn't the usual static-filled bark. It was specific. Hayes, Ortiz, report to R&R, immediate transport. The air left the room. The other inmates on the tier went silent, sensing the shift. A transfer is a disruption. It smells of change, and change makes people nervous. I climbed down from my bunk, my legs feeling like water. Ray sat up, wincing as he swung his legs over the edge. We didn't pack. You don't take anything from a place like this except the scars. We walked the tier. The gate buzzed open. I didn't look back at the cell. I focused on the back of the guard leading us. Not Macklin, thank God. A rookie. Receiving and release was a cavernous room that smelled of industrial disinfectant and stale coffee. This was the choke point. This was where the paper met the reality. A clerk, a heavy-set woman with tired eyes, was reviewing a clipboard. Hayes and Ortiz, she muttered, not looking up. Emergency transfer to county for federal testify and hold. Protective custody status. She flipped a page. Paperwork is signed by Vance. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Testify and hold. I had added that detail to explain the suddenness, to give the bureaucracy a reason to move fast. Then the door to the holding area slammed open. Macklin didn't just walk in. He invaded the space. He saw us standing there, unchained, waiting for the transport shackles. He stopped, his eyes narrowing, his jaw working on a piece of gum like he was chewing on violence itself. Where do you think you're going? Macklin's voice was low, vibrating with suspicion. Transport, the rookie guard said, holding up the shackles. Order came down this morning. Macklin snatched the clipboard from the clerk's desk. He scanned it, his eyes darting back and forth. He stopped at the bottom of the page. I watched a vein pulse in his temple. He was looking at the signature. D. Vance. The jagged, arrogant scrawl I had practiced until my hand cramped. This is bullshit, Macklin growled. Vance didn't sign this. These two are dirt. They ain't got federal hold. He looked at me. He knew. In his gut, he knew. He reached for the phone on the wall. "I'm calling the deputy warden." This was it, the breaking point. If he made that call, if Vance picked up, it was over. I felt Ray tense up beside me, ready to fight, ready to die right there on the linoleum. "Sir?" the clerk said, her voice sharp with annoyance. She pointed at the clock. "The transport van is outside. The driver is on a schedule. If you delay a federal transfer, you can explain it to the marshals. And you know Vance is at the conference in Sacramento until Monday." Macklin froze. The phone receiver was halfway to his ear. He looked at the clock. He looked at the signature. The symbol of a man who outranked him. A man he feared more than he hated us. The bureaucracy was a wall he couldn't punch through. He slammed the phone back into the cradle. The plastic cracked. "Get them out of here," Macklin spat, tossing the clipboard onto the desk. He stepped close to me, so close I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "If I see you again, Hayes, you won't make it to booking." "I know," I whispered. They chained our hands and feet. We shuffled toward the back loading dock. The heavy steel door rolled up with a mechanical groan. The light hit us first, blind, white, unfiltered sunlight. It wasn't the chopped-up squares of light from the yard. It was the whole sky. We were loaded into the back of a white van with tinted windows. The door slammed shut, sealing us in darkness again, but this time, the engine rumbled beneath us. As the van rolled forward, passing through the first gate, then the second, I felt the vibration in my teeth. We were moving. We were leaving the stone belly of the beast. Ray looked at me in the dim light of the van. He didn't smile. He just exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that sounded like a ghost leaving a body. "You did it," he whispered. "We aren't free yet," I said, staring at the floor. But we were. In a way that mattered. The van wasn't taking us to federal court. The destination on the form was a low-security county annex, a place with chain-link fences and sleepy deputies. We never made it inside. When the van stopped at a red light in rush-hour traffic, 3 miles from the annex, the lock on the back door, which Ray had been working on with a piece of wire he'd palmed in R&R, clicked open. We ran. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs failed. That was 4 years ago. I wish I could tell you that freedom is sweet. I wish I could say the sun feels warmer on this side. But the truth is, the prison doesn't leave you. It just expands. I live in a small town in Ohio now, under a name that isn't mine. I work in a warehouse, stacking boxes, keeping my head down. I check the locks on my door 3 times every night. I don't own a pen. I can't stand the feel of them in my hand. I haven't seen Ray since we split up at the bus station in Oakland. I hope he made it to Mexico. I hope he found that car he used to dream about. But I don't look for him. Connection is a trail, and trails lead back to cages. Sometimes when the wind is right, I can still smell the diesel and the stale urine. I wake up sweating, hearing Macklin's voice, waiting for the count. But then I look at the window. There are no bars. I forged a name to steal a life. I walked out a free man. But I know the truth that the system taught me, the one lesson I can never unlearn. You are only free until they decide you aren't. And I am always, always waiting for the door to open.